Prova microfono 1, 1, 2, 3, prova. Prova microfono 2, 1, 2, 3, prova. Prova microfono 3, 1, 2, 3, prova. Prova microfono 4, 1, 2, 3, prova. Prova microfono gelato, 1, 2, 3, prova. Prova microfono gelato, sala conferenze, 1, 2, 3, prova. leave
just
those.
one
This one.
That's the one.
Okay.
Maybe
Yeah, now it works.
that works.
It just with the arrows you can go
Yeah,
backward
no,
and.
straight. Okay. Good.
Okay.
Yeah. Can go back to the origin. Yeah, it's easier to walk around if that works.
Yeah, sure. So then if you need the microphone, I can use this one. If
Okay,
you're
no,
standing.
should work.
Okay. Because we are recording, so the microphone is compulsory for this reason.
I see. No, I understand. Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Do you also have slides, and did you already put them in there? Perfect.
Yeah, everything is good.
And it's what do you prefer?
Well, we try both.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a PDF already
In the desktop or?
on my key, but
Okay. Sorry.
Okay, because it's better to put it in the desktop.
Oh my goodness, I hate it.
I don't do
Here.
Windows.
Oh, thanks. I've just updated mine, and it's different now. Yeah. So it's
PDF.
for this one.
Let's look if it looks good.
Is this one? You have everything?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay.
And do you know how to remove safely?
Let's see. you. Just go there, and just after that on the right. Also have to mine. Ok.
Devo solo salutare.
Grazie.
Sì, ma per un minuto. Tu sei la prima relatrice, sei tu, quindi
Sì, solo la chair forse.
alla chair, solo la chair.
Last page.
Io parlo più.
Quando lei dico le due parole che devo dire per salutare.
Ok, va bene. Ok, allora
Giuseppe Nesi,
va bene,
sulle
grazie.
della facoltà.
Enchanté.
Buon pomeriggio, good afternoon, bonsoir. Je ne sais pas quel est le langage officiel de la journée, je peux parler n'importe quoi, n'importe quelle langue. Peut-être enfin c'est mieux de parler en italien du moment que nous sommes en Italie, mais en tout cas je voudrais remercier les professeurs qui sont venus de l'étranger et souhaiter naturellement un buon travail. Sarò brevissimo, volevo soltanto testimoniare l'importanza che la facoltà di giurisprudenza dà a questo workshop organizzato dal professor Caso, ma modello di in realtà cooperazione interdipartimentale, dal momento che, come voi sapete, anche il DISI, qui adeguatamente rappresentato, è fra gli organizzatori di questo evento. Mi è dispiaciuto non essere stato qui stamattina, avevo un altro impegno, però non volevo fare mancare appunto un brevissimo saluto e un augurio di buon lavoro, proprio per confermare l'interesse che la facoltà di giurisprudenza attribuisce alle iniziative che sono promosse in questo ambito e che, oltre a una cooperazione interdipartimentale, in realtà prevedono anche una forte collaborazione fra pubblico e privato, che è un altro modello di cooperazione a noi particolarmente caro, dal momento che allorché ci sono degli scopi comuni, la cooperazione fra il pubblico e il privato credo che possa dare i frutti migliori. Roberto Caso poco fa mi accennava cercava di sintetizzare il contenuto degli interventi di questa mattina, che mi sembra siano stati molto interessanti e vivaci e che hanno permesso di comprendere meglio alcune delle specificità di questo argomento. Dicevamo con Roberto che appunto io sono un internazionalista e noi quando introduciamo i nostri corsi diciamo sempre che la comunità internazionale è una comunità molto frammentata, molto divisa, nella quale non esiste un ente gerarchico sovraordinato di riferimento. Problemi analoghi in realtà si sono presentati nella disciplina di argomenti che alcuni anni fa potevano addirittura sembrare in fase embrionale e che grazie alla enorme diffusione invece delle telecomunicazioni, lato sensu, necessitano ogni giorno di più di regolamentazioni. Io credo che così come è fondamentale la collaborazione fra pubblico e privato, sia fondamentale in questo contesto la collaborazione fra il locale e l'universale. E quindi l'unico mio grande rammarico è quello che per ragioni di tempo, ma lo farò presto, non ho abbastanza expertise per capire meglio quello che voi state dicendo oggi. Ma sono sicuro che grazie alle comunicazioni che verranno fatte e anche probabilmente agli interventi che poi verranno raccolti, chi lo sa, si potrebbe anche fare una pubblicazione, anche io nella mia piccolezza, nella mia ignoranza, sarò messo nelle condizioni di interessarmi con maggiore competenza di questi temi. E quindi vi ringrazio, auguro buon lavoro e vi saluto e buona giornata.
Okay, so welcome back. Thank you for being here. I'm very happy to chair this second session, so this afternoon session, which will be a little bit different from this morning's one because this is more, let's say, academic, so more research, people that work within the academia. And the first person that is going to talk is Melanie Dulong She's a permanent researcher at the Institute of Communication Science of the CNRS in Paris. And she's also a visiting researcher on the London School of Economics. And she also works with us, meaning me, Roberto, Renato, and Leonardo, on the Net Commons project. So, and she's going to talk about commons and especially community networks as commons-based peer production, and talking about a diversity of models. So thank you, Melanie.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this workshop. Can I use this one? Okay. Well, I'm not so tall, so can you all hear me? Is it okay? Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much to our project coordinator and to Professor Caso for hosting me. Indeed, CNRS within the Net Commons project is in charge of looking at all the aspects related to the commons, which were briefly touched upon this morning. So I take opportunity of this remark to apologize for not being able to make my my presentation in Italian. Capisco un po', so I could pick up a few words this morning, but I would not be able to make more than one sentence. So with this presentation, I'm going to show you some established facts on the commons and on peer production, on collaboration, and the way these models of productions are established online. And I'm also going to show you some work in progress research to maybe lead to a discussion to see how we can try to better regulate, to better manage these community networks. So there's a diversity of models. So the field of peer production and of the commons is getting increasingly complex. There's also the development of the sharing economy, of collaborative production, and sometimes has a tendency to mix the models. And within Net Commons, we make a strong claim that the community networks have nothing to do with Uber. So we already started trying to systematize the field of the commons, digital commons, commons-based production a little bit, and we considered various types of commons. And in order to better understand and better qualify the plurality of models which community networks can follow for their implementation, we are relying on a typology we developed previously to look at peer production platforms, and we find it particularly helpful to untangle the various features and characteristics of a network. So the main criteria to describe and analyze community networks coming from this typology is the degree of centralization or decentralization. And we apply this analysis to the architecture, the ownership, the governance, and the model of value sharing. And because of the focus of the workshop and also the focus of my own research, which I'm leading at CNRS, I chose to put more emphasis on the techno-legal aspects of community networks. Just a brief comment on the theoretical foundations of this research. we rely on Coda's law, as Lessig wrote maybe 20 years ago, because the book was released almost 20 years ago, and all the offsprings. We also try to have a STS, Science, Technology and Society approach to consider the political role of architectures, especially in the case of community networks, of distributed, peer-to-peer and decentralized architectures. Maybe Leonardo will disagree, but I use in this presentation quite interchangeably the terms distributed, decentralized, or peer-to-peer, just to suggest that there's no central point of control. Of course, there are different flavors, but it's ideal types. So we use this feature to build a typology of this complex systems of the community wireless network. So the hypothesis is that all the forms, all the models used within peer production have features which impact and are impacted by the types of norms which are constructed on the platform by users. So we apply the level of decentralization to the ownership of the platform, the technical underlying infrastructure, also the governance models, the ownership or the liability, well, the legal rights regime of the output, how it's going to be qualified legally, and then on an economic perspective, the generation of value and how it can be further invested. So here is the typology. So if you take the example of ownership, it would be centralized if there's a foundation or a corporation owning the network, or it would be decentralized if it's completely distributed, or a little bit less decentralized, or if it's an informal, unstructured collaboration. For the governance, if it's centralized, if, for instance, a board of trustees has an important role in the decision-making process, it will be more centralized. And if all the peers, all the nodes of the community network are completely autonomous, if no one tells them what to do, and if related to the technology, because they're all interdependent, these dimensions, no one has the power to see what they're doing or to control what is inside of the packets which are being transported, then we have very distributed governance. As for the law, if we apply the distribution or centralization feature to the legal field, well, for property, copyright, it would mean to assign exclusive rights to a platform owner, but also full liability. And otherwise, if it's decentralized, it would mean exploding, fragmenting the rights and the liability to the nodes. And for the value, if it's centralized, it means all the benefits go to the platform owner, and to the contrary, if it's a decentralized model of the management of value, it means that it will be shared within the community, or if it's completely peer-to-peer, it will be spread within the society at large. So, of course, it's ideal types. It's not normative. The purpose is mainly descriptive in order to help us to better map and to better understand the network. It helps us to untangle complex notions, to see which one has an impact on the other, and also on a higher level, it helps to distinguish commons-based peer production from fake sharing economy platform who try to rely on the ethos of peer-to-peer, but which concentrate all the power and all the governance and all the value in the hand of a couple of shareholders. And last but not least, the idea is to use this typology a bit like a board of control in order to know which settings when we will be trying at the end of our project to make recommendations to the community networks and to the legislators to know what are the features, what are the settings that community networks have and that we have at our disposal to better regulate these complex systems. So if we take the example of governance, it will be who is deciding what are the terms of use, what are the rules of production, what are the rules of exclusion if someone is using all the bandwidths, for instance, who also is taking the choices in terms of design. And here is a scale, and based on a preliminary analysis on how the main community networks we're studying within the project are working. Apparently, Freifunk is more distributed, more decentralized, and GIFI, because of the existence of a foundation, is more centralized. So here is a table. It's going to be, well, it's part of a deliverable which you can find on the website of the project, and the second version is going to be published in a few days. So we try to look more specifically at the four main community networks in order to see how this typology applies. For the value sharing, either it means if it would be centralized, there would be an exclusive appropriation, or if it's decentralized, benefits would be redistributed. And it's very important for the sustainability and the development, the technical development of the community networks, because benefits may be reused to deploy more infrastructures, and GIFI has an interesting model to make these choices. So now back to some theory on the relation between law and technology. You can have three types of relations. I'm arguing elsewhere. First, the technology can try to dominate the law because technology is developed much faster, or the law can pretend to try to dominate and control the technology. And in France, we've had a couple of examples of corporations trying to lobby the legislator in order to impose heavy control on the technology. So, for instance, when peer-to-peer software was really big and really useful to download cultural products, there had been a proposal to outlaw the technology altogether. So we hope it's not going to happen to community networks during our project. The Adobe three strikes law, which cuts your internet access if someone used it 3 times and it was noticed to download a file, is also an example of this type of relation. Another type is a bit more integrated, is Lex Electronica. So it was also fashionable in the late 90s, and code and law are a little bit more integrated. An example is DRMs or rights expression languages, when the code tries to embed a legal contract or to enforce it. And a third model, which I'm very happy we're trying to explore within our project, I would call it peer-to-peer law. But just as I said 1 minute ago that code can try to embed some legal rules, what about trying to do the opposite, the other way around? If the law could also, in fact, if the code, could also export some of the design features into the law. So it means, what if we try to distribute legal institutions? How does the law react to decentralization? So first, when we have a look at how tort law, liability, responsibility deals with peer-to-peer, well, it's not very effective. It's not very easy because files and actions are fragmented and among nodes, and it's not straightforward to assign liability or responsibility on to one node or to one agent. And if we try, which Federica, you're going to present a little bit more in detail at the end of this session, then there's a risk of chilling effect, of again of domination of the technology by the law. So back to this proposal to try to apply the design principle of mesh networks, of peer-to-peer, to influence legal thinking. Maybe it's going to give us good ideas to regulate this complex object. So it's not the first time that the law has been trying to integrate peer production, because the commons, Creative Commons, for instance, it's a sort of distribution of the property with a copyleft as a first principle. So we could imagine, for instance, a distributed police by the users, which raises other problems. Well, the main situation comes from the fact that the communities, even if they are local and online, they're not stabilized, they are not formalized, and they are evolving. One day a node is here, and the other day the node is not here, and still the connectivity is provided. So as far as the legal reasoning is concerned, we have a theoretical break. I think I didn't really start on time, but okay. Well, I'm going to go through this a bit fast, because I'm just reviewing what are the options, what are the precedents of possible distributed law, decentralized legal regulation. So first, it's possible to have a look if collectives So not individual persons, but groups of persons without a fixed number or without an identity can be assigned liability. So it's a case, for instance, in criminal law when there's a murder committed within a crowd. Criminal law, penal law finds a solution for that, and there may or may not be very fair. Otherwise, in the field of law and artificial intelligence, it's possible to extrapolate and assign intentionality to software agents. So these are our precedents we can consider in order to think this transformation of the law to allow legal rules to govern collectives instead of individuals, which the law is used to do usually. Otherwise, there's a case which you're going to develop also, Federica, I guess, of joint collective action or joint responsibility, but is the fact that you are a member of a community network, does it translate to collective and shared responsibility? So it's a little bit difficult because you may think that you are contributing to help a political dissident, but it's the same network can be used to commit crime or to infringe privacy, and there's no way of knowing, especially if there's a layer of encryption. So we have to try to think about alternatives to define other forms of responsibility or of liability which do not blindly allocate tort to the exit node or to the owner of to the person whose name is written on the documentation of the foundation, which wouldn't be really fair. So if we want to define what a decentralized liability would look like, first we have a look at what is a centralized liability. So remember in the table at the beginning of the presentation, the scale. So the most centralized liability model would be the Adopi, because one user would be responsible even for another user. And then progressively, one intermediary could be responsible for tort committed by users, so that's a little bit less centralized, but still with the existing set of laws, we still don't know what is a truly decentralized liability, which would mimic the technical architecture of a community network. And then if we have a look at the theoretical framework of the commons, and Elinor Ostrom, who developed design principles for the governance, we see that there could be effective monitoring and a scale of graduated sanctions. But it's not very positive, it's not very inspiring, because it would point us to models like the French Adopi law or to surveillance, and it's not really what we want to achieve. And if we go completely outside of ICT to look at a case of distributed liability, there is this example of, because liability is also related to insurance. Insurances are a sort of collective mechanism to deal with liability. We pay a fee every month, and when a damage happens, then you receive some money. So in the city of Brighton in the UK, there is a model of peer-to-peer car insurance. And so you have to pay a pool contribution, and then there's a separate fee in case of additional damages, which would happen during 1 year. And you can pool within a small group of friends or neighbors, and it means that the risk is distributed literally among members. And if everybody drives really well, then it will lower the fee of the future year. And it's the contrary in case many people either are liable or suffer a damage. So when we consider this example of distributed responsibility, the main feature is that it requires a voluntary agreement and a level of trust among a small group. So it's much closer to the original model of Elinor Ostrom, who was looking at small-scale commons, a lake or a forest or a river, and it's not very close to global digital commons. And community networks are an interesting intermediary case because it's both global because of the reach and local because of the physical organization. So the future work would be to have a closer look at the organizational patterns of precedence of distributed liability and see how it affects sustainability or unsustainability of communities. So here is our work in progress research, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you, Melanie, for your very interesting presentation. And I do have some questions, but I would prefer to make them at the end of next presentation. The next person that would present is Wolter Lemstra. He's a senior researcher at the Technological University of Delft in the Netherlands. And he has a quite interesting background because he worked in the telecommunications sector for more than 20 years. And then he moved to the academia. So his view might be different from the normal academic person. So thank you for accepting our invitation. And he will talk about technology-based community initiatives, Part 1, Wi-Fi, and Part 2, the fiber to the home. Thank you.
Thanks for the nice introduction. Thanks for the invitation to join the team. I'm not a part of the Net Commons, but I'm affiliated with the topic very much. That's Delft Technological University. Yes, technology, but also a horizontal department that tries to link the various areas vis-à-vis policy. Because it appears to be very difficult, in the Netherlands at least, for civil servants to really bridge the gap between technology development and policy in terms of infrastructures. And hence, a new department was initiated, and I have been in a lucky position to do my PhD at that department. So, yes, I do recognize Ostrom, because this department is very much about institutional economics. It looks at infrastructures. Infrastructures can be considered commons. I mean, we have a story here, but also in general, in utilities and electronics in general. One of my PhD candidates' projects that I'm coaching is very close to the topic of Wi-Fi. It has to do with the radio spectrum as a resource, as a commons. And I think that's a true commons in all sense, because we really hardly can control. It is something that is somewhat physical, and we as users have to abide by a certain set of rules to make sure that it all stays up and working, or otherwise we get a tragedy of the commons. It was Leonardo who invited me to this event. We met in Barcelona, and Barcelona was already mentioned, the Wi-Fi example of Wi-Fi. Well, let me move around a little bit with my storyline and mention the second little work I did was documenting the innovation journey of Wi-Fi. And that was because when I did an interview for the Ministry of Economic Affairs about the topic of where is the Netherlands in terms of ICTs, I went to big firms, small firms, and I ended up to talk to Bruce Tuck, who was the technical leader of the R&D team in the Netherlands involved in Wi-Fi. That was interesting. When he told the story, I was flabbergasted. I said, why don't I know that story? I work in the same firm with you, we are living in the same country, and I don't know it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the conclusion was nobody had written down that story. Yes, many books about IEEE 802.11 and the technology and how to build Wi-Fi networks, but how Wi-Fi came about? Nowhere. Well, it's now available, so I can recommend it to you. I'll talk to you a little bit about the Wi-Fi community initiatives that are covered in that book. More recent, and that is the second part of my contribution, relates to the third book, which is about broadband developments in Europe. In fact, it is a collection of 12 country case studies by colleagues, local experts, who have captured the development of broadband from, say, around 2000 until 2013, 2014. An extremely interesting set of information. And I have a luxury position. I can benefit from it because I edited it. I've read them all. I commented on all the stories. So, yeah, I lived the stories. And that has led to some recognition with the European Commission that I seem to speak highly about community initiatives, hence an invitation last year to organize a one-day event about bottom-up community initiatives in telecommunication networks in Brussels as an additional input to the policy-making process. Because you can understand that the lobby of the big players is strong enough, but the voice of these initiatives are hardly heard. So that's a little bit of my background and my work, research work. Yes, indeed, after 25 years in the supply side of the industry with Philips, Telecoms, AT&T, and Lucent Technology. I was tempted to tell you a little bit more about Wi-Fi. 25 years of a great technology. Time is not available. I would love to talk to you about how it all came about in terms of technology and go back to Hedy Lamarr, an actress, yeah? And if you know the story, she was the first woman who performed nude in a film in 1939 or something, yeah? She didn't have the permission from her father, but she simply sneaked out to Czechia and did the film. She is the, together with George Antheil, the owner of a patent, or was the owner of a patent, how should I say that? That is the foundational technology of Wi-Fi, which is called frequency hopping. And then, of course, the story of Steve Jobs and the Apple Airport that created the market breakthrough of Wi-Fi. And then we can talk about community initiatives. Because we have technology that operates in a license-exempt or a non-licensed frequency space. So you don't have to pay, you don't have to ask permission, you can simply use it if you abide by a little set of usage rules. And that means that in places where incumbent operators failed to supply in the early 2000s broadband networks, there have been many, many initiatives into the using Wi-Fi to fill that gap. This example, probably known to you as insiders, is Gersland. And it doesn't exist anymore because it's filled a gap. Now the rollout of the network by TDC is rather complete, and in a sense the need for the network was seen as not anymore required. And in that case, it is a different story with Goofy, who evolved from Wi-Fi into fiber into a very mature network, as essentially a competition with the incumbency. There is another story, and that is the story of Nepal. This is Mahabir Pun, who told us the story. He lived the story, he created the story, because he had to walk a day to get from his village to another village, high up in the Himalayas. He introduced Wi-Fi with some help of the university in the US, and they tweaked with the technology to make the connections work. They built their own housing, because in this area, Wi-Fi has to be monkey-proof. Monkeys are very curious animals. They inspect everything, so you have to really make sure that the technology fits. And as you can see on this picture, there is no electricity supply over there. So you have to have either solar cells, and they also developed a water-powered generator to make it all work. How does Mahabir see this? This is gap filling for him. If the network from the incumbency moves into his area and takes over, he's not worried, because there is enough other areas where he can go and help to make this work. It's a community initiative, because it is owned by the local people now, after the initial funding. Some people operate it in combination with, or it's a part-time job, they get some money from it, and it makes money, not so much from the people that use it, but from the people who are trekking in the Himalayas. It's close to the trekking range up in the high peaks. They pay a little sum for being able to call back home. So this is basically sponsored by mountaineers. The community that is associated is a community, as I learned, that is willing to share, that is willing to teach others how to use the technology, how to tinker with the technology, and make it available to their specific environment. This is the example where Vic Hayes, my co-editor of the book, who has been 10 years the chairperson of IEEE 802.11, has been sharing his insights together with the guy who's in the back of him. This is Bjarke Nielsen, that is the guy from Jersland, where they share their knowledge. And the guy in front is experimenting with what we call a cantenna, home-built antennas for building Wi-Fi networks. Having listened to the stories this morning, to the extent I could follow it, listen to the story, your contribution, I thought, let me not go too much in detail of the technology, but let's also have a look at the community itself. That's why I took the picture of Wireless Leiden. That was for me the first case, and it is a very early case of Wi-Fi technology. It's a case in a very mature country. So this is not rural gap filling. No, this is a country where, or a place where techies were eager to demonstrate their capabilities in building a Wi-Fi network in the early days of the internet, when there was hardly any internet connectivity. That is an interesting storyline of techies, highly motivated, and then you ultimately end up with a network which covers a large part of the city, as well as branching out to villages in the neighborhood. One of my students at the time, a master's student, I asked, can you help me to research how this community evolved from techies mastering technology and reasonably quickly happy because they demonstrated it works? What is the sustainability? How do they continue? It's interesting when they study that. First of all, you mentioned legal environments. Well, they created a foundation to get some coverage relative to the legal environment. So that was one aspect that they covered relatively early. But in terms of motivation, well, much of our motivation is financially inspired. So why are there so many people involved in this community network? Well, there is a large contingent that is user and is motivated for the fact that they get access to things they don't get otherwise, or they get cheaper. It's interesting to see that the community evolved from techies to also having maintenance members, people who are prepared to do a maintenance job. And they adopt a node on the church tower. So they watch whether that is okay, and if it is not okay, they climb up the stairs, reset, and bring the load back in the air. So there is a shift in terms of role. When the student researched it, and I asked him, can you find literature that tries to explain this? He came up with Mintzberg. And I guess you know a little bit about Mintzberg as the guru on managerial systems. And his conclusion was, this community has started as a missionary entity combined with an adhocracy. Found that an interesting typology or typocum, how do we say? An interesting way of typifying the community. But it's also interesting to see where they ended up a couple of years ago, because they were mature, and what happens then. And he also looked at Freifunk, and I heard Freifunk mentioning today quite a bit. And Freifunk being on the left of your scale. Well, they said, you either integrate in the incumbency or relate to your environment, or you stay apart. And what I understand is Leiden engaged and linked with the environment. They have now a technical university that uses the network as a prototyping environment. So it's a different use. While I understand that Freifunk is still that entity that helps to bring communities together and learns and provides a platform, but does not want to conform with the incumbents. That's an interesting contrast that came out for me. So for me, it's not just technology, although I'm interested in the Wi-Fi technology. It's interesting to see how these communities evolve. This as an example, it's documented in our Wi-Fi book. And also there is another chapter which may be of interest for you. It's called Community Innovation. Scholars in the Trento University have used Wi-Fi cases to look at how innovation comes about and whether you can innovate as a community. And they have a chapter contribution in the book as well. So that may link to your research. Okay, given time, let me stop here with part 1, Wi-Fi, and move to part 2, which has very much to do with broadband on the other side, with fiber. And let me start with, what I kind of, my other love picture. The other one is Nepal for Wi-Fi. This is my favorite for fiber. And this is a situation at the end of the 1990s. We just liberalized telecommunications, and suddenly everybody, incumbents and startups, discover the great opportunity of building fiber optical networks. As you can see, they all recognize that opportunity at the same time, and they also recognize the same opportunity in terms of what to do. Because if you look where the connections are really connections between high traffic centers or financial centers in London, financial centers in Frankfurt, and the likes. This is an extremely interesting picture. By the end of the bubble period, i.e. in 2001, about 5% of the capacity was in use. So you may say this is economically not very sound. On the other hand, we had the backlash of the internet bubble. We halved the personnel in Lucent Technologies because basically the supply side crashed. What did not crash was the growth of the internet. It was a little dip in the growth curve, but it was still growing. And by now, all this capacity is used and more is added. So in that sense, we have been very lucky that it was built in the euphoric period. And this is only a picture of the networks that were built by Lucent, where I worked at the time, and there are many more networks that are not even on the picture. So fiber as a technology has been embraced broadly in long-distance communications. But fiber to the home in particular, has another issue. It has the issue that you have to dig the street, and ultimately you have to dig the street to a single home. So it becomes relatively costly to provide. Now, if you are in a situation where the incumbent operator, as is the case in Bulgaria, has not invested at all, or very little, because they were about to be privatized, but the privatization process was very lengthy, you can imagine that there are people, in particular ICT folks, that kind of have an urge to do something themselves. And this is not fiber to the home, ladies and gentlemen. This is FttH, which is called fiber to the facade, which means you just nail the cables and the boxes and the routers to the wall on the building, and that solves the problem. You don't have to dig, and that's the main cost element, and this is the easy way to connect. Now, the mayor didn't like it so much, so after a couple of years he started to enter into legislation and enforcement of building code regulations. But if we go back in time, I mean, we did it with poles. We still do it with poles. So the question is, what is more important? Getting a network up and running or having very nice facades? Now, in this case, I rather have nice facades, build up the network, improve my economics. And then ultimately, when I have the money, improve my environmental picture. But that is my interpretation. This, ladies and gentlemen, explains why some of the Central and Eastern countries who were backward in telecoms for many, many years are now leading telecoms in terms of data rates in Europe. Entrepreneurial initiatives. Some 670 officially listed at the time, maybe even 2,000 entrepreneurs in Bulgaria. Now, it's interesting. I would say this is leapfrogging in technology. Now, to make the picture a little bit complete in terms of bottom-up initiatives, this is another one. This is Sweden. What is the community here? That are the municipalities. 1 out of 2 municipalities in Sweden has fiber networking initiatives. Yeah? They see that as an essential element in the economic growth of the municipality. Now, Sweden, you may think, is a very rich country. Yes, but it's also a very rural country. What is it, 6 million people, 7, 8, 9? And look at the country. It's extreme rural. So in that sense, you can imagine that Telia at the time did not cover all the places that should be covered. Studying this case, it's interesting how they change the perception of where a public network begins or ends and a private network begins or ends. Normally it's at your home, and then you get a high cost of getting the cable to your home. Imagine that you move the interface to the perimeter of the town, of a municipality, and there you connect to the public network. Then all the activity within a municipality becomes an internal network that you control. If you then provide services to the citizens, provide services to the government entities, you can do that on an effective, much more cost-effective basis. And surprising enough, in the end, it is Telia who wins also. Because now you have a network that is open for service providers to be used on a distance. Now Telia can provide services without having to invest in costly fiber networks. So it's a win-win. And the third win here is that the graph suggests that where you have fiber, you have less migration from the rural areas to the main cities. And that in Sweden is a major issue. So this is the story about the municipality initiatives bottom up. Now again, in the Netherlands, not only in wireless Leiden, there's still some activity. Wow. 75 projects going on in our small country, bottom-up initiatives in the rural areas. Surprise, surprise. And we are leading the broadband league tables in Europe with the Netherlands and Sweden and Denmark. Still, there are community initiatives. Why? Because the rural areas are underserved. But the rural areas are not necessarily low-tech areas. There is high-tech farming, and this is an interesting picture of a potato farmer in the southern part of the Netherlands, who uses satellite and all kinds of technology, sensing technology, to improve his crop return. And yeah, he likes to be connected. And by the way, he has kids who are at school, and they also want to be connected. So you see still many projects in the Netherlands, bottom-up, appearing. Now, if you then look where we have fiber in the Netherlands, and I don't know whether you know the Netherlands a little bit, but the main city, Amsterdam, is over here, and the main seat of government is over here, and the main port is over here, and look where the bulk of fiber is. Not in the areas where most of the people live. It's outside those areas. So, what explains this? My hypothesis, these are basically deployments originating in community initiatives. I would argue this is peer pressure among citizens, among people in villages, where peer pressure is much more effective than in the kind of individualistic big cities where nobody knows anybody else, and here we see a result. So in the notion of community initiatives and how they survive and how they perform, I think this is another interesting example. In closing, these are kind of slides from the presentations which were collected during that session with the European Commission in Brussels in November last. And very interesting stories all across Europe in different flavors, different degrees of entrepreneurial versus community versus private, but everywhere. And the Polish case is also extremely, I found that interesting. You talked about ISPs, small ISPs. Small ISPs have very little buying power. They organize themselves. And by organizing, they are bigger than the biggest ISP. So they have the better negotiation position in terms of peer-to-peer traffic on the internet. So in that sense, it's also the way you organize yourself in terms of communities that you can improve your own destiny. This is a little snapshot of what I learned out of my research and the research of others. Happy to share, happy to discuss, and otherwise, thanks for the invitation and the opportunity.
Melanie, could you come back?
Yeah.
So, are there questions from the listeners? No one? Leonardo? Wait for that. Okay.
For each of our presenters, well, first of all, thank you both. And so for Melanie, there is like enough literature on governance of commons in material commons, and there is also enough literature on non-material commons. And community networks, they're actually something in between, because they do not fit the non-material commons, but they do not also fit the other exploitation model of material common. And so I would like to know, what do you think about where does one definition stop and the other begin, and how does it fit in your model, if you can give me some insights on this. And then the other question is, you showed us a first part on Wi-Fi, and Wi-Fi, as you said, is that technology that allows you to do links without digging the ground. So it's not just a matter of reaching other people that you will not maybe reach digging the ground because it costs too much, but it's also the fact that the network that comes out from a wireless LAN, for instance, it's completely different structurally than the network that comes out from an ISP. ISP networks are engineered to be to concentrate traffic, to do aggregation, so you have few links, a lot of nodes. So what do you think is apart from the capability of reaching other people that you may not reach with cables, if you think that there is a structural difference, and if this emerges somehow in your research in the way that people use this network and what kind of applications they may be enabled by Wi-Fi and not by wired networks. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. I'm going to use it to promote our project, because I do believe that we're working on the ultimate commons, and that indeed there is no literature which fully covers our scope of research and our needs, because part of the community networks are tangible, and then we're closer to the infrastructure commons. There's also a lot of literature on spectrum, and on that I wouldn't be really able to say much, but Felix, who is in the team, knows more. And I think it's possible to draw the line between the infrastructure and the digital intangible commons because of the activities which are enabled by the community network and the area of law which is used to regulate the activity. It's a lot of law applying to intangible activities and IT law, IP law. So because of the actual usage which is enabled by the community networks, this draws us intellectually closer to the knowledge and to the digital commons than the original materiality of the objects which we are studying. I guess. What do you think? Oh, everybody, I'm returning the question to the audience. I think it's an important one.
Interests me a lot, and it's the fact that I read the paper by Mako Hill, and he was observing that digital peer production system, they tend to degrade into an oligarchy. They made some quantitative experiments and measurements, and when you do not have a grounded organization that lives on personal physical interaction, it is probably easier to go in a direction of few people that control the infrastructure.
It's a re-centralization of the governance. Yeah.
Which instead, I suppose, it's harder when the personal relationship are mediated by the physical presence, and so that what you can do is actually limited by what you can physically do. How much can you participate? This is not like this in a wiki. If you're the administrator, you can keep banning other people for all day long, and this is much easier than kicking out people from this room.
People are more polite in the real world.
Exactly. So I think this is one of the things that actually we are studying, actually, and it's something that I'm really interested into understanding if the way we can manage and govern these communities in a way that do not degrade into that direction.
Well, you asked the question. My PhD student looking into the radio area and looking how the use of radio spectrum evolved since 1927, he comes to the conclusion that it's not a single commons. It is a multi-community commons whereby you have user groups that use a part of the commons, and the user group tends to be sufficiently different but sufficiently homogeneous to self-organize. So there are aeronautical users who organize and have their set of rules how they use the spectrum. There is radio amateurs that use it, but it means that as the commons becomes larger and more difficult to govern,
and it's not a commons.
Then where does it begin, where does it end? But here we see in history that it solved itself in some form by a multi-commons environment or a multi-user commons that has manageable governance structures. So that may have some bearing on the question.
I'm sorry, before you answer the question that Leonardo made to you, I also have a question for Melanie, but it's quite related. And it's related to what Leonardo also said. You mentioned that you're going to, let's say, measure the value shared between the members or among the members of the community and see how much value is shared. So the question is, what do you mean for value, and how do you actually measure that?
Well, measuring is... Well, if I said that, I shouldn't have said it.
No, perhaps you didn't. I probably misunderstood then.
Yeah, the idea of applying the centralization versus decentralization also to the value sharing aspects of the typology of peer production can also be applied to community networks in the way investment is being made to develop to develop the infrastructure and build it further. And also, in relations to this presentation, which has been made in Barcelona in June to this workshop our project co-organized, if the commons infrastructure is expanded, it benefits to the entire society, because also non-commons based and commercial and proprietary service providers can rely on the infrastructure, because it's neutral. It's not dedicated only to the community networks.
No, fine. Time for questions. Yeah, related to what you said and your question relative to, can you see a difference between the traditional telecom models of funneling from end users into the network and the other way around? First of all, I should remark that Wi-Fi, as used in community initiatives, is a different use than it was originally invented for, because it's a local area network. And to build a network of longer distance, you need point-to-point connections. So there is already a tweaking and a change in the technology usage that I think is important. I see wireless Leiden as a network of nodes that operate at the same level. But of course, Leiden is a community that also wants to communicate with the rest of the world. So there is a funneling element between the network and the rest of internet. So in that sense, you never, I would say, escape kind of the ISP notion of somehow getting into a different network. That also holds for the fiber network of the municipalities in Sweden. But it is, you aggregate possibly on a larger level, and your position relative to the outside world changes. And yeah, you make it more easy to access for others, and the value of the network goes up if you have more users. So in that sense, it plays into your value appreciation. The other notion that came up on your question was related to the ad hoc working that Wi-Fi can also do. You don't need a network. You can connect between individuals on the basis of devices. FireChat is an application that was used in the uprising in Hong Kong and in Egypt. In the uprising of Hong Kong, it was working outside the network, and in Egypt, the network was cut down, but still the people could communicate. So that is device-to-device communication, which is part of Wi-Fi. It's interesting, it is also required by our police and fire brigade as part of cellular 4G, but now it has to be built in. And how do they do that? They revert back to the Wi-Fi protocol. That's interesting. So device-to-device is another element that puts it on kind of a level. And that triggered another notion of cognitive radio, whereby cognitive radio, the notion of cognitive radio is about a device can sense its radio environment and determine, based on its needs, communicate in a certain way with its external environment, and setting up connections in such a way that you can more efficiently use the radio spectrum. Cognitive radio comes from the military, because this is all about you want to say something, but you don't want to be detected. So if you can sense your environment and do a bleep to anybody else that you want to connect, and then you're out of the air, you have a totally different environment. So maybe there is also some inspiration that you can find in other ways of communicating and other forms of being connected or not being connected or not being detectable, I should say. Those are the associations I have with your question. Thanks.
Are there other questions? Okay, so we have a coffee break and we should be back in 15 minutes. And thank you to Wolter and Melanie again.
It was a pleasure. Thanks.